Why, hello there, and welcome to Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and if the zombie apocalypse were raging outside, I'd be on your team. We're going to take a refreshing break from politics today and talk about hominids. Now, this is relevant to the program because I myself am a hominid on my mother's side, although we're not fanatical about it. We really only do hominid stuff on high holidays. But either way, we're going to talk about hominids with Natalia Reagan momentarily. But before we get into that, let me ask you a question relevant to this week's sponsor. When you have a vigorous workout at the gym, you need to replenish, don't you? Something which hits the spot is refreshing, but also has protein in it. A lot of people go for protein shakes, which is like the fast food of protein. Obviously, steak is the best option. But what if you just don't have time to sit down to a steak meal right after a trip to the gym? Introducing beef smoothies. Beef smoothies, made from genuine pulpified beef, have all the nutrient value of a quarter pound of brisket, but have been conveniently liquefied for you so you can drink it right when you finish at Planet Fitness. Let's say you run a marathon. That's 26 miles. Wouldn't it be a good idea to gas up a bit halfway through? Well, that's not a problem if you've got a thermos of beef smoothie with you. Just pop the top and enjoy an entire meal of teriyaki beef right there without even having to stop. Just jogging and drinking delicious barbecued meat drink. Now let's say you just really like the taste of roast beef, but you hate chewing. You work hard, you've had a long day, and you just don't want to chew. Well, with a beef smoothie, which has the easygoing consistency of a thick milkshake, you can down that sucker at your own leisurely pace and watch Netflix or something. Beef smoothies from Liquid Meat Incorporated. It's raining meat. And now it's time for Heaton Reviews, where I review arbitrary things based on my own criteria. Today, we're going to rank dragons, based on which dragon would be the best to take to my nephew's 4th birthday party. Number 7, Smaug. I'm ranking the evil dragon from The Hobbit and The Hobbit Does Dallas as the worst dragon to take to my nephew's birthday party. Smaug is the prototypical greedy dragon sitting on top of a pile of gold and eating virgins. So we're already off to a bad start. If we get a piñata, you can bet Smaug is going to dash in and try and hoard all the candy. And do you know where there are a lot of virgins to eat? At a 4-year-old's birthday party. Number 6, Puff the Magic Dragon. I don't remember a lot about this dragon from childhood, but all of my stoner friends tell me that he's a metaphor for getting high. I don't think it's appropriate for children to smoke marijuana until they're at least 8 years old. So this dragon would be a very bad influence at a 4-year-old's birthday party anywhere outside of Oregon. Number 5, a Chinese dragon. This is a mixed bag, and I've put Chinese dragon in the middle of my preferences. Pros: looks super cool, nice boxy head, very festive. Cons: tons of banging noise. I don't know if you've ever been to a Chinese New Year, but they are loud. I'm not expecting a 4-year-old's birthday party to be super quiet, but I also don't want to have to spend my afternoon covering my ears from gong noises and fireworks. Number 4, whichever dragon from Game of Thrones isn't dead. If you're a big Game of Thrones fan like me, you know there are actually 3 dragons: Drogon, Rhaegal, and Mitch. Drogon is okay. Rhaegal got harpooned. Mitch the dragon died from a heart attack in Season 4 after he ate a bunch of fried food. So I guess we're talking about Drogon. Drogon is a super cool dragon, and I think he would be a lot of fun at a 4-year-old's birthday party. There's a slight chance he would get irritated and burn the house down or possibly eat some of the toddlers. But if he doesn't eat any toddlers, then I am by far the coolest uncle to show up to Chuck E. Cheese, and I am definitely winning the cool uncle competition. Particularly against Uncle Pete, who isn't even an uncle, he's just a stepdad Corey calls his uncle. Whatever, Pete. Number 3, the dragon from the Welsh Flag. This guy's pretty cool. The dragon on the Welsh flag is the throwback to the Tudors, who kept the red dragon of Cadwallader on their crest to signify their Welsh origins. At the epic Battle of Bosworth in 1485, King Henry VII fought beneath this red dragon sigil against his arch-nemesis, evil King Mitch. Team Mitch was defeated, and the Lancastrian Tudors won the day. So I think the red Welsh dragon would be welcome at my 4-year-old nephew's birthday party, because he would teach the kids about history. Number 2, Falkor, the luck dragon from A Never-Ending Story. Falkor is charming and adorable and is sort of like a big dog who can fly. which is just about the only deficiency dogs have so far as I can tell. Lack of aerial maneuvering. He gives out advice and he hangs out in Fantasia, and so makes a pretty good addition to a child's birthday party. Do you like dogs? Do you like dragons? Then you'll love Falkor. Falkor is my runner-up dragon, which brings us to the #1 dragon to bring to my 4-year-old nephew's birthday party, Godzilla. Godzilla is the biggest, baddest dragon, and he can belch radioactive fire. If anyone so much looks at Godzilla funny, he skips over to Japan and starts laying waste to towns, just stomping and spewing fire everywhere and swiping at that big stupid moth. Godzilla would be a great way at a child's birthday party to show kids the value of self-esteem or something. Either way, Godzilla is awesome, and if anyone disagrees with me, Godzilla would absolutely pulverize them and then flatten a village for dessert. Godzilla, 5 stars. My guest today is Natalia Reagan. She is an anthropologist, a comedian, and a television host who focuses on primatology and studies spider monkeys. She has written and hosted for shows such as Star Talk and $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty, which is amazing, and I'm delighted to have her on the show today. I am so stoked to have you on, Natalia.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed your last sketch, by the way. I'm a huge Godzilla fan.
Nice.
And actually, that's actually how my boyfriend, I think, bonded, was he has a Godzilla collection and I have a King Kong collection. So
really?
We knew it had to be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The fact that an attractive, successful nerd met her boyfriend that way gives me so much hope. So thank you for letting me know that.
You're going to be fine.
I'm going to be fine. I need to just wear it on my sleeve. Just go ahead and go to the bar or the convention or whatever and put it out there. Okay, great.
I'm going to get you a Godzilla shirt, so it's literally on your sleeve. Nice.
I like that. Before we get into to hominids at large, real quick, you did a Bigfoot show?
Yes, so I'm a primatologist. In fact, what inspired me to become a primatologist years ago was I actually had recurring King Kong nightmares as a very small child, and eventually grew out of them, or actually learned how to lucid dream and shrink him down to about the size of an orangutan. But all my work making science comedy videos and primatology videos led the executive producers to find me to co-host $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty. Say that 10 times fast. So with hunky 1990 Superman Dean Cain hosting.
Oh, yeah.
And and Dr. Todd Disotell was my esteemed co-host. He's a molecular anthropologist at NYU, and I was the field primatologist. So I got to explain to the contestants why their theories had huge gaping holes in them, because they would come to me and say, I had all these different theories that none of them made real sense if you're looking for a new species of primate. I was trying to explain to them that, if I wanted to go back to the future or, time travel, I would need to, know physics. I'd need a DeLorean. I need a red puffy vest, some plutonium, and Doc Brown. They needed to think like a primatologist. So I taught them all the things about like reproductive strategies, diet, dentition of non-human primates, and let them hopefully use that new information and amend their theories, or realize that the chances of finding Bigfoot are next to zero.
I'm going to check that out. I've spent a number of hours listening to Coast AM, which, if you're unfamiliar with it, is like the BBC for people who've been abducted by aliens. So I have just...
Oh, great.
I have like a master's degree in cryptozoology, like unofficially, in cryptozoology, conspiracy theories, alien abductions, that kind of thing. I've thought about this a lot, and listening to an actual primatologist talk about Bigfoot would be an interesting position, as opposed to what I normally do, which is listen to people that are going hunting and are like kind of drunk, and then like Bigfoot gets in their car or something like that. Good stories, but
exactly. It doesn't even chip in for gas money. It's really rude. Bigfoot can be kind of a jerk. No, I'm on a Travel Channel show right now where I deal with a lot of cryptozoology clips. It's a clip show, and of course I'm generally the professional hater on the show that is the skeptic that is a bipedal bear in the woods that's not Bigfoot. I'm sorry. Or more recently, we had a unicorn, and I'm like, do you even know how easy it is to fake a unicorn, guys? Please.
My sympathy to you. I have some familiarity with being the professional wet blanket in a room. And it's not as much fun. It's more fun being the loud person that doesn't have to think about logic or anything. The logic thing's usually thanks rationalism, great.
I know. I feel like I'm the Debbie Downer of paranormal shows.
Yeah. Well, we got to have it. So we'll scoot back a little bit from paranormal to the hominid realm in which we live. Now we spoke briefly before the program. So just to make sure that I've got the terminology right, I had been saying hominids, and I think previously we had sort of grouped hominids as us, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, basically bipedal apes that can throw sticks, I think was the technical definition. But you're saying that that's now changed.
Throwing sticks wasn't, I think, a prerequisite. However, very close. Yes, and hominid was the accepted term for many years, and they've moved away from that, and now they're using the term hominin. Hominid is used for with an in. Yeah, okay. It's hard to say too. I have to say, because I do a lot of shows where I talk about hominins, and it's you have to really stress that nin. And as a Nine Inch Nails fan, I also appreciate the nin. But yeah, hominids include the great apes. Because one of the things that I always like to present or bring up when I'm talking about primatology is that humans, first and foremost, are primates. If you believe in such things, and you don't, again, there's no believing in evolution, it just is.
Yeah.
But we are primates, but we're also part of the family Hominidae, which are the great apes. So you've got gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and Homo sapiens. So we are part of the great apes, but I do say that some of us are greater than others, and some of us really
William Shatner's off the charts. That guy's great.
He's fantastic.
But that makes sense too. Like I'm thinking about like at first when you said that, I thought maybe that was a like kind of a political maneuver, and then I thought about it more, and I was like, that probably is just the fact that we're 99% genetically identical to chimps. I think that's the right. Like I think are we 1% different than chimps?
We're like 1.2% different. Like 98.8% is around the accepted number, but again, very close. Let's just go with extremely close. And even like there's so little genetic variation within our own species too. There's more genetic variation within chimpanzees as a whole than there are in humans. So there's been, of course, a big pushback during with these DNA testing, Ancestry.com tests about saying, looking at the uniqueness of humans, which we are very unique as individuals, but really when it comes down to it, we're all incredibly connected and very closely related. So, they say they can even probably trace the majority of the living population on Earth back about 3,500 years ago, that we probably have a common ancestor that recent. So there's even question of how accurate or how much they can really tell a specific individual about who they are ancestry-wise. Did
you say 3,500 years, so 3,500 years ago?
No, yeah, 3,500 years ago. There isn't, it's a very shallow genetic pool that we have. In fact, there's more genetic variation within the founding, the original population of Homo sapiens in Africa than there are between populations. So there's more genetic diversity within populations within Africa versus those outside of Africa and those within Africa.
Well, that's right, because like anybody who's not African is descended from, so far as we know, one group that came out of Africa into Eurasia. So all Europeans, all Asians, all Native Americans, everybody is descended from, I think they around anywhere from 150 to 1,000 people about 20,000 years ago. Like it's a fairly small.
It's a very small population. Yeah, and there was also, that's another thing they're realizing over time is there's been multiple waves of migration out of Africa by even populations that were not Homo sapiens, like for instance Homo erectus. Coming out anywhere between 1.9 million to 1.7 million years ago out of Africa into Eurasia and populating parts of Eurasia during that time. And so, people have never sat still, ever. We are nomads by nature. And so to say that, there was only one wave out of Africa is kind of silly. So, and understanding that is taking more and more time. And of course, as more researchers find more fossils and being able to sequence ancient DNA, which is fascinating. But there are limitations, of course. If it's over a certain age, it's hard to get viable DNA from a fossil sample. But we're able to fill in excuse the loud noise in the background, there is a trash truck that is to end all trash trucks out. It might be Godzilla.
Oh, no.
Outside. Yeah, it was nice knowing you. But yeah, basically, yeah, it's hard to know exactly all the pieces. But as we're filling in, it's like a giant puzzle where we don't even know where the edges are, and we're filling in it as it goes. You know, so it's looking less like a tree and more kind of like a bush, like a giant bush.
And I'm amazed by. I read a book about 2 years ago. I think it's called Before the Dawn, and it's about that kind of. It's about Homo sapiens before the agricultural revolution. So that stretch of, I guess that would be about 280,000 years, because I think right now we think we're about 300,000 years old as a species. Is that right?
Roughly.
Okay.
Yeah, they found a new species in Morocco, or a new fossils in Morocco that possibly push it back 350,000 years old as a species, but it's anywhere between 350 and 250,000 years old as anatomically modern humans.
But
then agriculture.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, agriculture, they usually put that or sort of breeding livestock and plants around 12,000 years ago.
12,000, all right.
I mean, you know, but there might have been, that was like when it was more widely done across populations rather than, you know, spurts of it.
I'm amazed by, in reading the book and reading what little information I have on hominin research, the amount of logic and deduction that goes into it. So there was one study that came out that endeavored to figure out when we developed clothing, which, you know, obviously we don't have any clothing left over because it would have rotted, you know, years and years and years ago. So we were trying to figure that out. What they came up with was that they could tell the genetic difference between head lice and body lice. And as I understand it, there's kind of a genetic drift and mutation. So you can sort of you can look at the difference between head lice and body lice and then figure out when they forked based on that genetic mutation, and then make a reasonable inference that body lice don't develop until we get clothing and the head lice can migrate. And so we can use body lice to figure out that we've had clothing about, I think it's 70,000 years or something like that. But I read that and I was like, this is detective stuff with lab coats. This is amazing.
Yes, it is. No, it's fascinating. It's the way you can sort of infer things and deduce, like even, you know, obviously clothing, diet, looking at teeth and understanding what people were eating at these times and how, what you know, not only that, but inferring from what they ate, what led to encephalization or increased brain size in our hominin ancestors. So it is like they are. I think paleoanthropologists are probably, you know, got some of the coolest work to figure out how we got to where we are, you know, with very little to go on. And especially when you're looking at how they sometimes deduce new species. Sometimes they'll only have like a few teeth and a pinky bone, and that's, you know, how they found Denisovans. So it's you know, you're given very little. It's almost, it'd be great to have a board game, you know, the paleo board game. Where,
you are making just like a Venn diagram of nerd on nerds with a board game for hominid research.
Actually, right there's a new video game coming out. Gosh darn it, I forget the name of it. Oh man, I don't want to clickety clack on my computer.
Well, let me know. We'll tweet it out. We'll do a live show and then do that afterwards with whoever's at the bar.
Right, but it's it's a human evolution board or a video game where I think you have to sort of go through the actual process of becoming upright walking from being, you know, a quadruped living in the tree, you know, having a more of a terrestrial versus arboreal lifestyle, you know, what that would look like, how you would do that, the tools you make, because I think that's a fascinating game that is a great way to teach kids how the heck did we get where we are from chimps.
But no, before I lose track, you mentioned the Denisovans. Did I say that right?
Denisovans.
Denisovans. I've been calling them Denisovans, which is clearly wrong.
I know.
Denisovans?
It's kind of potato.
Okay.
Denisovans is generally.
But you said that they were identified, or we identified that hominin species by like a finger and a rib or something like that. How do you extrapolate from that it's a full species and not just an aberrant individual that had, you know, some kind of mutation?
They actually, they did a DNA sequencing and they found that there was enough sort of distinct genetic material that made them distinct from Neanderthals and from anatomically modern humans.
Okay.
They also find those, so for instance, you hear a lot of those of European ancestry have Neanderthal DNA in their genome, and usually those from that have, or from, you know, Asian populations have Denisovan DNA in their genome. So they are distinct in their location and also just in their genome in and of itself. And they just recently discovered a new hominin in the Philippines. Hold on one second, let me get the name right, because the name is it's a new one. So I feel like they're coming out with new ones so often, and it's fast. Well, because I mean, they're just the amount of research being done, and also the new techniques are fantastic. It's Homo luzonensis, and it was found in the Philippines, and it's again based on teeth and 6 small bones, and it was based on basically sort of unique characteristics, and there's still work that needs to be done. Paleoanthropologists kind of can be lumped into 2 groups, lumpers and splitters. And the lumpers are the ones that when they find new fossils are more apt to go, wait a minute, hold on, maybe these are not a new species, maybe this is just a variation on an existing species. Whereas the splitters are like, it's a new species. Let's, and splitting also. Wait,
so if I'm at like an anthropology convention, is that a good conversation starter? Where if someone tells me they're a primatologist, I'm like, are you a lumper or a splitter? And then they're like, I'm a lumper, and I'm like, yeah, you look like one. And I storm off.
Yeah, I knew it. I could tell. Yeah, right.
I could tell. Lumpers love plaid.
Yeah, there's a lot of really unique scarves. That's the first thing I tell people when you go to an anthro conference. Be sure to stock up on some skull scarves because you'll just fit in.
Ooh, nice.
Perfectly. Yeah, but lumpers and splitters, it's a thing. And there is money in splitting, too. If you think about it, if you discover a new species of hominin or primate, that cha-ching, that can mean more grant money from further excavations or further research if it's an extant living species. In primatology. So there is a benefit to lumping and splitting, but oftentimes if you look at, anatomically modern humans as a species, there's a lot of variation across the globe. So it's hard to say sometimes what's right and what's wrong, but I leave that for the paleoanthropologists that's their sole job, is to basically know the osteology of their species and their, the anatomy.
Well, so you've mentioned a few different species now. We've got, to lay the mental map for people listening to the program, our species, Homo sapien, we're, as you said, about 350,000 years old. But there's an overlap,
correct,
is there not, between Denisovans and Neanderthals and ourselves? If we were to, at the peak moment of different intelligent hominin species all sharing the planet, how many were running around in addition to us at the same time?
At a certain point, and now we've got this new one from the Philippines, potentially. That's one right there, Homo luzonensis.
And then there's Homo florensis. That's my contribution to today's conversation.
Yeah. There you go. That's very good. That was the hobbit found on the island of Flores in Indonesia, closely related to Homo erectus. And Homo erectus was found, of course, on Java, in China, and throughout Eurasia. But yeah, at the same time, you got Denisovans, you got Homo, and Neanderthals can even be described as Homo sapien neanderthalensis, or they're part of their own Homo neanderthalensis. There are differing factions that believe that Neanderthals are more closely related to humans, in which case they will call them Homo sapien neanderthalensis. Versus the Homo neanderthalensis.
Audience, remember that when you go to your anthropology conference, remember them's fighting words, depending on who you're talking to. Be careful.
They can be. Oh man, I actually went. Speaking of Homo florensis, I remember going to a panel, and there were words, very harsh words, being exchanged between different scientists because some thought it was a population with microcephaly, a neurological. Basically, their brains were much smaller, like the infants that have Zika, that have the very small brain cases. They thought maybe that was what this was a population that were microcephalic, versus just a whole nother species. And so there was actually a fight kind of that broke out. There weren't fists thrown in this particular one, but there was some yelling, some harsh words, which, keeps it interesting. But there was Homo florensis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and then Neanderthals, Denisovans, and this new species of in the Philippines. So roughly about 5, 6. If you're, there's also if Heidelbergensis was still around. There's at a point they kind of hedged on being around the same time, which is another hominin species that was found in Europe. But if you want, I can take you through a little bit of a map.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, because like Homo erectus throws me off. Are we descended from them? Are they like a root species for us in the Neanderthals, or were they a lateral thing that we all co-evolved from something else? Or you know what? I'm going to sit back. Please map it for us. I'm sure that you can cover this.
Well, no, okay. So I'll start way back there. So about 6-7 million years ago, we share a common ancestor with chimps, and chimps go on and do their thing in terms of evolving, because that's one of the things we have to remember is
that kind of thing, bananas. Yeah.
Exactly. They went through their college hippie phase, lived on Venice Beach. Well, they did their thing. But chimps have been evolving as long as we have, so they've had their own trajectory. But about 7 million years ago, we have Sahelanthropus chadensis, which is one of the first hominids, the oldest that we have, about 7 million years ago, which has signs of it being potentially upright walking. And the way you can tell that is the position of the foramen magnum, which is the hole that the spine goes into in the skull. And the more forward positioning it is on the skull, the more likely it was an upright walking hominin. Okay. If it's further back, it makes sense that it's coming out the back, and it would be a quadruped and would have probably relied a lot on climbing and living in the trees.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then as we go, and
that's legit. That checks out.
Right? And then more around like 5.8 years ago, there's Ardipithecus Sediba, which is another sort of trajectory, and we don't know if they're necessarily, and this is the thing about hominin evolution, we don't necessarily know exactly how it all connects together. We're figuring that out. So, but we have our Ardipithecus Sediba, and then Ardipithecus ramidus comes after them, and they're again upright walking. But however, we don't know necessarily if they led to Australopithecines, which are the next group of hominids I'm going to get into, and that includes the very famous Australopithecus afarensis, or Lucy.
Oh, okay.
Which a lot of people,
that's like the celebrity hominin.
She is the celebrity. She gets celebrity status. Yeah. And she was found in East Africa in 1974 by Don Johansson and his research assistants, Ethiopian research assistants so basically she lived anywhere between 3.8 and 2.9 million years ago. And this is in East Africa. But there was also an Australopithecine that also lived in South Africa around 3.3 to 2.1 million years ago. So a little bit younger than Lucy, but within the same trajectory, the same line of this tree. And there's also Australopithecus Sediba, who's even younger, living about like 2 million to 1.9 million years ago, that also lived in South Africa. So you're seeing these hominin species throughout Africa. They're not just in South or East or even West Africa. They're sort of radiating all throughout the continent.
Okay.
And those are thought to give rise to Homo habilis, which is, as you know, or you might know, handyman. That's the hominid that basically
the first hominin that uses a wrench.
Exactly, yeah. Except their wrenches look like a rock that might be a tool. The Oldowan tool industry kind of came up around 2.6 million years ago, and so they were the first ones that really were using actual tools. And then there was Homo rudolfensis, who came a little bit after Homo habilis, but had a bigger brain size, and that's how they sort of distinguished the two particular species. And then an interesting finding, and one of the things I love pointing out, is the new techniques being used to discover hominins is caving. They're going down into caves and being able to find fossils that have just, of course, haven't seen the light of day for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And a few years ago, it's a really great story, there was two cavers that went down into this cave called Rising Star in South Africa, and they're both extremely thin, very skinny guys. They are.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, but it would. You probably it would not be of great benefit to be a man of rotund girth if you wanted to go caving. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're not asking, I don't know, Fat Albert to go spelunking. It's not generally.
I can almost fall through a bicycle grate, so maybe that should be, maybe I should get into that instead of rock climbing.
Hey, you know what? Let's talk.
Okay.
I think I got a new career path for you.
Yeah. Cover myself with Crisco and then just shimmy into a cave and look for bones.
Exactly. Just throw a headlamp on you and good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these guys go down into this cave, and they went even further. They found another little slit that you could go down that I think it's like 6 or 7 inches at one point, where you have to just suck it in and go down. And they went down, and they found these really cool bones But apparently, I think their camera ran out of juice, something stupid, where it was like, and they knew this was something. They're like, this is weird. We think this could be something. And a few years earlier, Australopithecus Sediba, that species I just mentioned, was discovered by Lee Berger, and actually, I think his son stumbled upon a bone. It was pretty cool. And some of the stories of how these things are found are actually some of my favorites, but anyways, including this cave one. But Lee Berger had discovered this new species, Sediba, and so these guys were like, wait a minute, we should tell Lee about this. And so they reached out to him and they said, we don't have any pictures, but it was pretty darn cool. And so he went back and determined that this is a good site to excavate, and they got some good pictures. And so Lee put out on Facebook that he was looking for very skinny spelunkers with archaeology or paleoanthropology experience. And of course, I remember when this was spreading around, and I'm not that skinny, so I was like, well, shoot, this is not for me. Also a little claustrophobic, but the people that applied, he picked the 5 best, and they happened to all be women, and all completely just fantastic and badass in their own right in their research. And they went down there and basically excavated Homo naledi, this new species of Homo, that is actually really interesting because they're very young. They're young like humans. They were only around from about like 335,000 to 230,000 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And but they were much more in terms of like brain size, a lot smaller. They weren't as innovative as say Homo sapiens were or thought to have been. And so, that's how they discovered this new species. And from there, they're actually doing more excavations in caves because they're realizing what a rich asset they are, and how so many things might be hidden down in various caves throughout Africa. And if you hear a lot of these species that are discovered, like the new one in Philippines, or there was a new fossil find in Tibet in a cave of Denisovan remains. So caves are a great place because for something to become a fossil, they need the right sort of environmental factors. You want it to be dry, you want it to be cooler. It's, things, as you can imagine, really get gross and
So like a swamp would not be a good place to deposit some human remains that you want to pick up in a couple million years.
No, not unless you want them to become peat.
Well, I do like Scotch, but
exactly.
It would not. I suppose, help the growing knowledge of hominid studies. Then.
No, but your grandpa would taste amazing.
Yes, I think so too.
Dark.
Particularly given the amount of liquor that man drank, it would be like quintuple distilled liquor. Yeah, fantastic.
Right. But moving on, so after Homo naledi, we found that most recent hominid find in terms of the Homo genus, aside from the Philippines. Again, see, I'm sorry, it gets kind of hairy because there are just so many out there. It's like a radiation of different hominin species. Mm-hmm. But you also have ergaster, and ergaster and Homo erectus are oftentimes conflated, or there's not. Some camps are like ergaster is the direct ancestor of Homo sapiens versus maybe erectus and ergaster were very similar, and we should not split them up into two different species. But Homo erectus is often seen as the one that left Africa, that populated Eurasia, into China, into Indonesia, and ergaster is distinct and was the precursor to Homo sapiens, which then left Africa. And after they left Africa, that's when they ran into these knuckleheads, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans.
So let me pause you to make sure I've got the chronology down here. So we've got some root group. It's either Homo ergaster or Homo erectus, or some group that's preceding both. Homo erectus gets out of Africa and populates the rest of Eurasia. Homo ergaster turns into Homo sapiens. We eventually leave, and we're like, oh, there's all these Neanderthals and Denisovans already running around, and they're descended from Homo erectus?
Well, there's a couple other Homo that might be the precursor to Neanderthals. There was a Homo antecessor, which is thought to be maybe a common ancestor of those that became Heidelbergensis, which then gave rise to Denisovans and Neanderthals.
Okay.
And Homo.
That's what I thought. That's what I was going to posit. I bet you there was this one interlocutor species with a long Latin name.
Yes. Yes, because Heidelbergensis or antecessor. I mean, there's, and again, this is where it gets kind of a little muddy, and that's why there's not all the answers are there, and that's what's I think so interesting about this field of study, and with this, the new ability to sequence ancient DNA. I think we're going to get a lot more holes filled in, and again, there's being research being done, I think across the globe about how do we really fill in these blanks with the right order of species. And the thing is, what we're finding out, even as we look at the genome of our own species, is it's a very messy process. I mean, there's a lot of admixture and, getting down with different, like Homo sapiens got down with Neanderthals, which got down with the Lice
I'm part Neanderthal, at least based on the 23andMe results that my family got.
I was going to talk to you about that. That's actually what this phone call's about.
I get that a lot. People at bars are like, you have a very prominent brow. I'm like, well, yeah. So does Kelsey Grammer. Leave me alone.
I actually worked with Terry Bradshaw years ago, and it was right when I first started taking paleoanthropology and bioanthro classes, and I just could not stop staring at his brow ridge.
Is that the footballer? Am I thinking of the right guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that you're fine, because I don't know. I'm like, you play that sports ball.
Well, you've established yourself as a Hong Kong Godzilla primatologist. Your credentials are not in question as a nerd. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I was definitely like just checking out, because I remember I was working on the shoot, and somebody was like, "What are you staring at?" And I was like, "His brow ridge is magnificent."
Ladies, be sure to use that when you meet a fellow. Your brow ridge is magnificent.
Oh my God, you're supraorbital Taurus. Wow.
Well, so those Neanderthal, because I want to get into Neanderthal stuff too. How long do we overlap with Neanderthals? Because they're around pretty late in the game, right? Like they hold out in Spain or something for a long time.
Yeah, they were around till about, I think, let me double check, like 40,000 years ago, but they showed up around 400,000.
So we've got a good 200,000 year palling around period with our Neanderthal buddies.
Okay. We just kind of hang out, and then there was very much two camps for a very long time. Those that thought Neanderthals were, and by the way, it's tall versus thal, only because the name came from Germany. They were from Neander Valley. And
that's great. No, this is good, because I can use that to correct sciencey people to sound. It's like when people use whom correctly. I'll start doing it. See, it's actually Neanderthal, and then I'll just kind of lean back. Nice.
Yeah, just throw that one in.
Really, all I'm doing is just fishing for ways to sound smarter when I go outside.
Yes, exactly.
But it's helping so far.
I totally understand, because I do that all the time, and especially if you go to the zoo and somebody looks at that chimp and goes, "Oh, Mom, I love that monkey," and you're like, "No, it's not a monkey." We got to be those actually people.
We got to be the wet blankets. That is our role, but someone's got to do it.
My little Debbie Downer. But yeah, so Neanderthals are really cool because they, obviously lived in Europe. They were paler. They were known for having probably the first ones that had red hair, which evolved separately from anatomically modern humans having red hair as well.
So not all gingers are descended from Neanderthals?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, that's something to be pointed out. However, they were much stockier than we were. There's a couple different rules about body size and climate, and there's the Allen's rule, which is basically thought that animals that are in colder climates are going to have shorter limbs, basically to retain heat.
Okay.
Bergman's rule is the rule that basically, based on colder climates, you're going to have like sort of stockier build creatures, just because
I've been to Scotland
again, right?
Yeah.
My whole family. You should see the legs on these guys. They're like tree trunks. So Neanderthals were very much, stockier, broader, shorter limbed. They also had a very broad nose. They thought that they have bigger noses, and you can tell the size of a nose if you look at a skull, because obviously cartilage doesn't preserve, but you can see just sort of the start of the nose, that these Neanderthals had big old schnozzes, and they thought that was to warm up the air when they were breathing in, because they needed, they wanted to warm it up before it got to their lungs. It didn't just freeze their lungs. They had actually very big brain sizes. They were, about sometimes 1,600 cc's versus anatomically modern humans. Brain capacity is usually about 1,400.
But we don't know the proportion, though, because what makes us so wonderful at building wristwatches and things is that we've got a pretty good sized neofrontal cortex, I think, right? But we don't know what the proportions would be in a Neanderthal.
Exactly. That's the thing, that just because something has a big brain doesn't necessarily mean it's smarter.
Whales don't have watches.
Braided body side. Thank you. I mean, maybe they do.
They're pretty smart. We might be missing out on some stuff. They might not need them. They might just have really good internal
social
clocks.
Intelligence. Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, so definitely there are some differences when you do look at a brain. You know, obviously what's being used and how it's being used very much matters. But yeah, Neanderthals, they also had these very heavy faces. You know, the big brow ridges, the big nose. They don't, which is very unique. What humans have and nobody else has, no other hominin has a chin. That mental eminence, that chin you got there, that is unique to you. So when you're feeling down about yourself, look in that mirror and just be like, you know what, man?
Go to the zoo and taunt chimps for their lack of chins. Be like, look at you guys.
Keep your chin up. Yeah, right? Yeah.
So is there a consensus yet, or will there ever be on what happened to Neanderthals? Because I've heard a bunch of different. I mean, the kind of the most cynical and sad theory is that we just killed them all. I've also heard that forests receded as the ice age stopped, and so the kind of natural biome for them started retreating, and we just kind of filled in the gaps. We did interbreed with them to some extent, so they didn't get completely wiped out. But what's the best guess on what occurred to them?
I think right now the idea is perhaps being outcompeted. So not only like the environment changing, any sort of environmental changes are going to have make some sort of effect on their ability to survive. But I think humans' ability to communicate so well and be so social, because we don't know exactly their extent of any use of language with Neanderthals, because obviously humans are the only species that has a real written language that can be passed on and carried on. So we don't know exactly how well they were communicating with one another. That is a huge part of why humans are so good at cooperating. That's why things like cities can exist, as we can communicate with one another. So perhaps competing Neanderthals is an issue.
We're on that. Maybe they had a smaller Dunbar's number ratio than we do. We'll probably do a full program on that, because I'm fascinated by Dunbar's number. But
really,
if you know about it, please come back on and we can do a whole thing on it, because the show really goes into tribalism a lot, and I feel like Dunbar's number is a very important piece of that tribalism puzzle. But as a quick synopsis for listeners, basically Dunbar's number is about 150. 150 people is the amount of people that you can remember are a person in a like proper individual sense. After that, it becomes sort of a vague abstract. And so that's kind of our root number is 150. That's about the size of a human group where we all know each other. But like chimps, it's like 30, I think, before they start splitting. And Neanderthals, I don't know what their number would be, but let's say that they had if they had like 50 and we have 150, well, then we've got an inbuilt organizational advantage over them, because if there's ever like a battle or something, we're probably going to have more people that can communicate and do kind of can get together and fight.
Yeah. You don't know who Oog is?
You can take that with you to the anthropology convention. That's yours,
yes,
Natalia.
I'm taking it. Yes, exactly. I'm going to come back and we're going to talk. Yes. Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, because I mean, especially just even not just Neanderthals, but like even going back even further. Like where does it grow? Where does it stop? How did it? Because I wanted to talk quickly about just the increased brain size in our hominin ancestors and why that might be. So about 800,000 years ago, fire came into existence, or they finally figured it out. They hacked fire, and that was probably Homo erectus that was able to actually get the fire
Tip of the hat
going.
To Homo erectus.
Yeah,
good job, lads.
Yeah, exactly. And Homo erectus, just so you know, I mean, they were upright walking hominids before that, but these guys had longer legs. They had bigger brain sizes, and one of the cool things about looking at the encephalization or increased brain size in our hominid ancestors is it's kind of like what you are, what you eat, and they basically were using fire to cook not only meat but also things like tubers and other vegetables, root vegetables that are very high in calories, because brains are expensive organs. They require a lot of calories to operate. And so things like, eating manioc and different tubers and meat, and also insects, are thought to have led to an increased brain size in hominids out there. So that's something really interesting. And 2 billion people around the world actually eat insects. So this whole idea of eating insects is gross. Oh, waiter, there's a fly in my soup. Maybe you need to slurp it up because it actually has a lot of protein, than other meats. It's just not as fatty, really.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, we've got to finish up here in a second. I want to run a final thing by you that I don't know if this is true, but I thought it was really interesting. So I mentioned earlier that I've got, apparently I'm on the upper end of Neanderthal DNA levels, according to 23andMe. But
Neanderthal.
Excuse me, thank you.
Neanderthal.
I'm being nitpicky. Neanderthal. And it's my understanding, I think everybody that's not an African has some amount of Neanderthal in them, or is very likely to. So there's a lot of, or there was a fair amount of mixing outside of Africa. The thing that I thought was really interesting was that we can trace genetic descent either through mitochondria or through chromosome. If it's mitochondria, it's through the female line. If it's chromosome, it's through the male line. And the only Neanderthal DNA that we've been able to find has been chromosomal, which would indicate that everyone alive today, if you've got a Neanderthal ancestor, it's a male, and there are no existent female line Neanderthals. And I thought that was interesting, but I'm not sure if that checks out.
I actually, you know what? I don't know the exact answer to that question, honestly.
Okay.
No, because I don't want to give you misinformation.
Oh, no, I appreciate that you're not just bluffing. That speaks highly to your credulity.
I do not want to bluff. I do know those that are experts in this particular field, and I can come back with an answer. And I'd rather do that than just make something up.
Fair enough.
And just so you know, there was a mixture between, and that was actually hotly debated for a long time between paleoanthropologists that swore that anatomically moderns would never get down with a Neanderthal, and those that were like, oh yeah, totally, because I actually once saw a paper where a man basically did a what wouldn't humans have sex with talk. And it was hilarious. At one point he talked about a human trying to have sex with a mailbox. But, of course, with the sequencing of the human genome and Neanderthal genome, we know that we did. But there wasn't a ton as it may seem.
Right.
Like we have, and those
and we don't know if it was. I suppose the most Disney-esque version would be that we had like a Neanderthal encampment and a Homo sapien encampment, and occasionally there'd be a swap of mates.
Little tea party.
Yeah, exactly. The worst version would be that there was just rape that happened, and so it was a kind of infliction of genes from a different camp onto us. But I don't suppose there's any way we can really figure that out. The only thing that we could potentially do, if that premise that we only have male DNA from Neanderthals is correct, that would perhaps indicate that it was not necessarily consensual. But then again, we don't know. Maybe the male Neanderthals were like, I'll just go live in your camp, whereas the females wouldn't. And then again, I don't know whether that's accurate anyway.
One thing I wanted to point out, I remember when you were asking that question, because I remember there was the way that it mixed best. I think it was, it says modern human females and male Neanderthals had trouble making babies. So there was I think the ones that were successful, viable offspring were Neanderthal males and then human females. Or I'm sorry, the flip of that, excuse me. And so basically that there's a reason why there might have been issues.
So it could have been like a sterility thing? I think that I could be wrong about this, but the Venn diagram, if people listen to the program, there's a lot of nerds. There's a surprising amount of agricultural overlap.
Good.
So I suspect that someone might email me and be like, yeah, like if you take a mule and like a donkey and a horse, it has to be a male horse and a female, like that. Occasionally that happens. I think with ligers and tigons.
Because it's a henny and a mule.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on which gender it is. Unfortunately, we've got to wrap it up. I think I could keep doing this for a long time, but we're under time constraints. Natalia, I had a great time talking to you. Thank you for coming on the program. If people are as bewitched and interested in what you're talking about as I am, where can they find you and where can they check you out?
Oh, wonderful. I talk a lot about monkeys and non-human primates. Oh, Jesus. Monkeys are non-human primates. I must be tired. I'm on Twitter at Natalia13Reagan, and I have a website that has updates and whatnot. So go ahead and follow, and I'm on Instagram as well, same handle.
Wonderful.
But I love talking about paleo and monkeys and apes and humans too.
I will do just that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tad bit of listener feedback before we wrap up the program today. On iTunes, Tug R says, Andrew is a delightful host with equal parts self-depreciation and hilarity. Well worth a listen to anyone looking for insight outside of the echo chamber. You can watch this whole show on YouTube. If you look for Something's Off with Andrew Heaton, then you can see my handsome bearded face with its distinctly Homo sapien chin and assortment of suits and lovely waistcoat that I'm wearing today that you would never see a Neanderthal in. You can also see the dead bison head we screwed to the wall. Watching Something's Off with Andrew Heaton is a sacred right guaranteed to all of us in the United States Constitution. People died for your right to watch this show. So go to YouTube and start watching full episodes. I look like a patriot. Do you? Remember, you can always tweet me at Mighty Heaton or Facebook me at facebook.com/Mighty Heaton, or even email me by subscribing to my newsletter at mightyheaton.com and just replying when I send it out, or if I give you a confirmation email, which I would. Finally, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. That helps other Homo sapiens discover this here political orphanage. Thank you, and good day.